Back to the daily grind. The channel's getting false flagged by triggered trolls, so make sure you subscribe to the new channel. Let's get to the MMA news. This video is requested by Obese Level DC. He said I should do a video on Brock Lesnar's professional MMA history. Let's fucking get to it. Brock Lesnar's 9 professional fights overall. Only 8 of those, you may come to be surprised to find out, were in the UFC. He actually had one fight before the UFC that a lot of people don't mention or don't know too much about, and it was his introduction to MMA. And it was against a gentleman named Min Soo Kim in K1. This fight was in 2007, and he won by submission to punches. I actually watched this fight. I went back and watched it just to do the research on this video, and it was funny. The guy, Brock Lesnar, man, it's how most people would expect a Brock Lesnar fight to go. He lands the takedown, gets on top of you, and just fucking, it's what he would do to anybody at any bar he ran across. You know, anybody that's not a fucking super highly trained MMA fighter that can deal with his size. This is pretty much how, you know, you expect Brock Lesnar to dismantle the average Joe. Take him down, get on top of him, and ground and pound him out, and make him tap the ground and hope he gets off of him. Luckily, there was a referee here to make Brock get off of this guy. He tapped to strikes. He didn't get knocked out or anything. He was getting grounded, pounded in the full mount, and he just tapped to get out of the ground and pound, tapped to strikes. That was Brock Lesnar's very first MMA fight. Then he went on to the UFC. It was about 7-8 months later, after his first MMA fight in K1, he went to fight in the UFC. He fought Frank Mir in his very first fight. That's a hell of a matchup for your very first UFC fight. This was at UFC 81. It was February 2nd of 2008. So, his first fight was June of 2007, second fight February 2008. This fight, he ended up losing in the first round. It wasn't looking too bad for him until he ended up getting caught in a fucking knee bar by Frank Mir, one of the best grapplers, jiu-jitsu specialists that the heavyweight division's ever seen. So he got caught in a knee bar and he had to tap, and he lost that fight to Frank Mir. But tensions were still high after that fight, and they eventually rematched. We'll get to that. After he lost in his first UFC fight, he went on to fight Heath Herring. He went on to fight Heath Herring, and he got his first UFC win. This was at UFC 87, and this was shortly after UFC 81, where he lost to Frank Mir. It was in August, so it was about 6 months later. He fought against Heath Herring, and he got his first win. It was a unanimous decision, and he dropped Heath Herring in the first round with a huge shot. And you see the picture there, the huge shot. And then he went on to continue to fucking do what he did to Min Soo Kim, pretty much, minus the tap to strikes. He started wrestle fucking the guy. It exposed Brock Lesnar, his jits a little bit in this fight. His jiu-jitsu, man, he got exposed just a little bit because he was riding Heath Herring all night. Dude couldn't get up. He was wrestle fucking him, but he couldn't get a submission at all. He wasn't able to get the TKO or the submission. It was just Brock Lesnar on top of somebody dominating him pretty much. So that's how that fight went. So Heath Herring lost. It was Brock Lesnar's first UFC W. He went on to fight Randy Couture at UFC 91. He headlined. I believe this was for the title, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, he knocked out Randy Couture TKO to punches in the second round. This was, you know, to a lot of people, this was his first, like, elite test, as far as Randy Couture is a legend of the sport. Everybody, you know, Randy Couture, he's known by a lot of people and respected by a lot of fighters. So, Randy Couture, he lost to Brock Lesnar. It was TKO to punches. Next fight, he got his much anticipated rematch with Frank Mir, UFC 100, Lesnar versus Mir 2. That was just an entire epic card. Probably, I think to this date it has the highest sales. I mean, Conor might have just beat it with UFC 205 possibly, but I know UFC 100 actually beat even like Conor's first like a few Conor fights and Rousey fights. UFC 100 held the record for a long time. So it was Lesnar versus Mir 2. This one, like the first match, even though Brock Lesnar lost, they didn't end on good terms. So this rematch was much anticipated. Everybody wanted to see it. There was a lot of heat going into this fight, and Brock Lesnar was able to come out and win, man. He won by TKO in the second round, and after the fight, you always see that famous clip. He had a horseshoe in his ass, and I pulled it out of him. Oh, Brock Lesnar dropped them one-liners. He'll drop the bombs on you with the microphone. So he fucking got his vengeance on Frank Mir, and man, now they're both 1-1, and it would be epic to see a trilogy fight between them, but it hasn't happened. If Frank Mir would have went on to beat Mark Hunt in his last fight, There could have been UFC 200, Frank Mir versus Brock Lesnar 3, but Mark Hunt was able to beat Frank Mir, and that didn't happen. So that would have been so epic, UFC 200. But we're not into that. Let's get to his next fight after Frank Mir. He knocked out Frank Mir, went on to fight Shane Carwin. And in this fight, you can say he improved on his jiu-jitsu a little bit. You could tell because he won it by submission in the second round, and he won by arm triangle choke. I remember watching that fight with, like, I was still in high school and shit. When was that? 2009. That was the year I was graduating. Okay, so it was July 11th, 2009. No, that was Frank UFC 100. So this was 2010. Okay, the year after I graduated. So Lesnar versus Carwin, I remember that because my cousin, who was a hardcore fan back then, I was just casual back then, he was talking about how big Shane Carwin's hands were and shit. So, I mean, I was into it more than most people, but at the same time, I was like, okay, Brock Lesnar versus this fucking heavy knockout artist. I remember Shane Carwin was knocking people the fuck out back then. So, Shane Carwin versus Lesnar, I remember watching that fight. It was a great fight. I forget exactly how the fight went, but I forget how something happened that was disappointing. Oh yeah, Shane Carwin was looking good in the first round, if I remember correctly. Hit Brock Lesnar with some big shots, but then I don't know if he gassed or what, but he ended up getting taken down and submitted in the second round by arm triangle. So Brock Lesnar was on a 4-fight winning streak after beating Shane Carwin in the UFC. He lost the fight to Frank Mir, then he went on a 4-fight winning streak in the UFC, looking really good, coming to the UFC the champion. So next, he went on to take his next loss and losing his belt in the UFC to Cain Velasquez at UFC 121. This was a pretty brutal knockout. It was Cain Velasquez's claim to fame pretty much. A lot of people, still have Cain Velasquez to this day as the greatest heavyweight of all time, and a lot of it can be attributed to him fucking smoking Brock Lesnar when Brock Lesnar was on a 4-fight winning streak. That put a lot of fucking eyes on Cain Velasquez for sure. So Cain Velasquez knocked out Brock Lesnar, ended Brock Lesnar's 4-fight title run, his 4-fight championship run, and that's pretty much was like the end of the glory days for Brock Lesnar, unless you count UFC 200, which we'll get to soon, because after Cain Velasquez beat Brock Lesnar, knocked him out in 2010, he lose again in 2011. About a year later, he took a year off after the Cain Velasquez fight, and he went on to fight Alistair Overeem in his return. And this was a kick to the body followed by some punches. This was before the Mark Hunt fight. It sucks because it exposed Brock Lesnar a little bit, his body, because whenever he showed in the Heath Herring fight that he couldn't get the submission, he came back 4 or 5 fights later and got a submission over Shane Carwin with the arm triangle choke. So he showed he can get a submission. Now, whenever he lost to Alistair Overeem, that was his most recent fight before the Mark Hunt fight. And in that fight, he took 5 years off after this fight. He got kicked to the body, and you could just see the agony on his face, and it was over from there. So the kick to the body, his body got exposed a little bit there by Alistair Overeem, and so he hasn't fought since then. So you just question his how much damage his body can take if he is to return. But he did return 5 years later after 2011. After his loss to Alistair Overeem, to the kick to the body followed by punches, he returned to face Mark Hunt at UFC 200. He was supposed to be fighting Mark Hunt. Okay, so Mark Hunt ended up losing that fight, but it was overturned because USADA was in the picture now, and Brock Lesnar was exempted from USADA. He was able to get exempt from USADA. Sorry, I just got a notification. He was able to get a USADA exemption, so he ended up fighting Mark Hunt at UFC 200. He got the win, and then a few days after the fight, he popped dirty for estrogen blockers. The same thing John Jones, who was also on that card, popped for. John Jones wasn't able to fight. He was pulled off of his fight for testing for estrogen blockers at UFC 200. That was supposed to be the main event, and it got canceled. So Miesha Tate versus Amanda Nunes was moved up to the main event, and Brock Lesnar, he still was able to fight that night. He fought Mark Hunt. He looked good, but he was popped for the same thing as John Jones after the fight. So a lot of fight fans, it's questionable if he's ever going to come back, because that was his last fight in MMA. That was in 2016, July of 2016. It's coming up. It's been a little over a year since that time now, and there's been rumors and talks, and a lot of talks about John Jones versus Brock Lesnar potentially happening and Brock Lesnar's return to the octagon. If it happens, it's looking like it'll happen in 2018 because Brock Lesnar is currently serving a suspension by USADA, or even if it's not a suspension by USADA, that might be already over with. I believe he got a 1-year suspension possibly, and that would be over by now. But now, to return to the UFC, he would have to go through a 6-month testing period by USADA where he would have to prove he would be able to be clean off of all banned substances for 6 months before he can return to the octagon. And with his history of performance enhancers and estrogen blockers and such, that's not very likely. So even though Jon Jones and Brock Lesnar have been doing a lot of talking and angling for a fight, who knows what happens? Jim Ross, a longtime WWE commentator, came out and he believes that maybe the speculation is for Brock Lesnar versus Jon Jones in the WWE, which would suck for MMA fans who want to see Brock Lesnar back in the octagon, a super fight with Jon Jones. But honestly, if we're being realistic, that makes more sense. Jon Jones versus Brock Lesnar in the WWE, because Brock Lesnar's got about 60 pounds on Jon Jones, and in MMA, that's huge. And Jon Jones would have to, bulk up a lot to face Brock Lesnar in the octagon. And the WWE, you can have Brock Lesnar versus Demetrius Johnson, and Demetrius Johnson could somehow win. So that makes a lot more sense. So it is what it is. I mean, I would love to see Brock Lesnar come back, but I mean, I just don't know with USADA if it's possible. What I would like to see happen actually is for Brock Lesnar to get signed by Bellator, because they don't have as strict of a drug testing policy. Frank Mir's potentially signing with Bellator. We can get Brock Lesnar, Frank Mir 3 over at Bellator if they are able to somehow sign Brock Lesnar. We could also have like Fedor versus Brock Lesnar. We could have all type of Brock Lesnar fucking craziness in Bellator if it was able to happen. So if we could get Brock to Bellator, that would be so epic, just to get the Frank Mir Brock Lesnar trilogy on top of some other big name heavyweights over there. We got Bobby Lashley over there, former WWE fighter, versus Brock Lesnar, former WWE fighter, in the octagon. That would be dope. So I mean, I don't know how likely it is Jon Jones versus Brock Lesnar will happen. If it doesn't happen, I would love to see him go to Bellator. If not, man, I might fuck around and watch WWE for the first time in 15 years if it's Brock Lesnar versus Jon Jones. I would just love to see Brock Lesnar picking his ass up or something and putting him in like a fucking, hitting him on it with the F5. Some shit where he spins him around in the air. Oh, shit, that would be dope. All right, it is what it is, man. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit subscribe on... you can hit subscribe on this channel. I've got 2 channels going right now, so I'm uploading both of these videos. I'm uploading this to both channels because I've been getting false flagged by some salty trolls, as you heard in the intro. So I've got 2 copyright strikes. This motherfucking channel, this channel can get shut down any moment just due to false flagging. YouTube doesn't check the content before they give copyright strikes. They just assume. I mean, you got the same title, it's the same thing, so somebody's making the same. It's crazy. It's craziness going on right now to the channel, but it's all good because we will prevail. We're not going anywhere. Do this 300 times until YouTube gets their shit together and they're able to actually see this false flagging for what it really is. And actually, I got an email today from YouTube and it's saying it should only take 10 to 14 days, and they have to respond proving that they're gonna come in. It's really copyright, or else my shit should get restored. So if we can last 10 to 14 days, that would be so awesome. I promise. If we get 10 to 14 days comes and they remove those strikes and restore my videos because it's not really copyright, I will be going so hard on this channel at those motherfucking people who have been false flagging me. I will be going full heel, turning full heel. I will be going ham. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, give the other channel a like, and I'm going to be doing a debate show with my brother called the Big Brother Beatdown. We already got a channel up. We haven't started. I've just been posting a little bit of Snapchat videos over there for now until we get the studio equipment that we need to start this debate show. It's going to be epic. It's going to cover mostly MMA because I'm going to be the one main running the channel, and also he's casual MMA fan, and he's big into NBA, NFL, and other big sports on ESPN and such, and I'm more casual to that stuff. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be an interesting dynamic, and I'm going to be shitting on him like I do every motherfucking person, every troll that comes up in the comments thinking that they can fuck with the bull. Let's go, hitters. Hey, yo, full Voltron. Let's go. Brock Lesnar's history's out of the way. Let's get it. Thanks for the request. It is what it is. Let the hitters know what the fuck you tap in the comments, dude. Yo, form Voltron. Fuck the Mayweathers.